There's no why. People think why. You're buying, when you're buying a stock, you're not buying a story. You're not reading a bedtime story. You're not saying, oh, well, this is going to happen and that's going to happen, then magically the stock will go up. No. The market is a machine that values the price of something over long periods of time based on the cash flow of the company. Because you're a simple human, you want to understand narratives. Narratives are easy for us. We sit around the fireplace, talk about, oh, AI is going to kill Chegg and this and that. The reality is, all you care about in finance is, am I buying the right thing for the right price? And that's more sometimes a technical, very technical thing. You can't just simply say, oh, I don't like this story. Turn the movie off. It's not that simple. Company makes money, stock goes up. Cisco was down 90%. The company kept making money. Same thing with Amazon. You're looking for bargains. Chegg is a bargain. Because people irrationally, like most of you probably, irrationally think that AI will completely end their business. The downside's very low. In fact, they're trading at 1x earnings. All they literally have to do is survive, and the stock doubles. But you want to listen to the bedtime story because you're new to this. I'm true to this. I'm not telling you any more about Chegg. That's for me and my partners. You don't need to know nothing about it. That's a mandatory. That's Mando. I made 2 or 3 phone calls to my biggest backers. Said, what do you think about buying this company out I'm looking at? They said, well, oh, sure. We'll back you. What's the company? Chegg. Oh. Dang. Narrative is only valuable insofar as that you can understand what the future cash flows are. They're also valuable when you're trying to trade. When you're trying to trade, you do have to understand what Wall Street cares about, what Wall Street wants and thinks. That's why the stock went from 10x earnings to 1x earnings. So it's very important. But if you're willing to buy and buy it forever, don't care what anybody thinks, you just care does the check clear? Right? What do you think Buffett cared about in his life? He cared about what Wall Street thought, or did he care about, am I getting these cash flows, accumulating them, and snowballing them? You can give a fuck less what Wall Street thought, right? That was the whole ethos of Berkshire Hathaway. Buy and invest like you're an owner. I can understand the temptation of getting some quick money out of a trade or something, but don't let your renter's philosophy turn into an owner's philosophy. You're thinking like a renter. When you think like an owner, you say, okay, I own Chegg. What if I told you tomorrow I can give you Chegg for free? You would say, Martin, that sounds great. Because Chegg makes money and it's very valuable. You wouldn't say, no, I don't want $200 million. You would take it in a heartbeat. Then you'd go at the operation, you'd say, well, okay, how do I make sure that this thing is worth more than $200 million next year and the year after that so I can pass it to my kids? Now you're thinking like an owner. Thinking like a renter, everything's out of your control and you're just guessing what the market might think. Okay, so Home Depot's not growing anymore because we're in a pseudo-recession. Listen, if Home Depot revenue is down year over year, we're in a recession. That's the rule. Bagel's still slapping. Still slapping. I get my always testy. Exactly, shirt dirt. Exactly. I don't care for real estate. I don't understand it. I understand biotech. I understand software. Why do I need to understand a new thing? Jay, you're asking a really good question. You may be one of the few smart people here. I'm kidding. I love all of you. But look at what Jay I need the sugar. I don't have any sugar in this coffee. Look what Jay is asking. He's asking a critical question. Is the stock market zero sum? I do believe that the answer is yes sometimes, and people fail to realize that. For big companies in the S&P 500, it's less zero sum, but for a lot of stocks, it's zero sum or negative sum. Be very careful when you invest. This kind of just jumped out at me, and this crazy idea here. But can you guys vibe with me for a second? Just let me cook, let me flow for a second. Let me know what you think. I need to rap for a little bit. I need to flow. I'm in a flow state. Okay. Home Depot, one of the biggest companies in the world. Okay. 300 or 400 billion market cap. What does Home Depot fundamentally do? They buy somebody else's product, mark it up, and sell it. Right? Yeah, this is a cool freestyle. They buy somebody else's product, they don't make it, and they sell it to somebody else for more. That is what a retailer is, right? What is their gross margin? 34%. Okay. So another company, similar size. We just looked at it. If I cover it up, what does this company do? Only show you the financials. I said this company has a 16% gross margin. They're smaller than Home Depot. Am I right there? They're about the same size, honestly. About 100 billion in revenue a year. But their gross margin is 16%. But which one's the retailer? You'd say probably the 16%, right? One company does nothing but buy product and sell it back. The other company uses the highest technology, the most innovative stuff, to build meticulously this product that has thousands of parts, bit by bit, and only have a 16% margin. Nvidia does the same thing for the H100, and the margin's 80-90%. When Tesla does it, the margin's less than a retailer. How can that stay? Home Depot sells their own products. That's white label is probably very profitable, but something is wrong, right? And this is why Buffett hated the auto industry for a long time. The PP&E requirement for the cash flow you get is very limited. The other way to look at it is the revenue from Tesla really their revenue? Or can you remove in like a special model what the table stakes are for their base components? And think about like what does their value added income statement look like? Because if you look at eBay or Uber, they strip out the gross merchandise and they just book revenue as their takeaway. You can almost look at cars as the same. The chassis and all the stuff you're buying is kind of like table stakes, and as a consumer, you're sort of buying a big chunk of the car. You're sort of buying regardless what car you buy. And you can almost think of it as like, okay, if the car was no gross margin, but they're selling you a battery, that's kind of would be what their gross margin would be. And their gross margin on the battery is much higher. So are they a battery company? Because if you told me Uber has 3% margins, that's not true. Yeah, the ride is 20 bucks, 18 bucks goes to the driver, and 2 bucks goes to Uber, and then Uber has an income statement where they get 50 cents at the end. But that's not how Uber reports it. Uber reports it as the driver stuff is table stakes. Our revenue is those $2 times a billion, and our costs are just our system costs. We don't even think about the driver. Abstract that away. And if you abstract the necessary break even, you start to look at the business totally differently. And you say, well, we're just in the auto business just to sell these batteries. The batteries are the margin. The auto's whatever. The batteries we have 50% margin on. So it's something to think about. Can Tesla license their FSD to others? Can they license their battery to others? There's a lot of ways that they could kind of, could you guys that we just looked at earlier meticulously and said, right, here's 9 million cars. And Tesla says, you know what, we want you guys to all use our batteries. And they're the only guys in town. They have their own lithium mines. They do it all right. Who else are you going to buy a battery from? And they got a good brand name. So if you're Toyota powered by Tesla or Volkswagen powered by Tesla, they're not going to get all of them. But they could get a deal with a couple of these guys. And if they have 50% battery gross margins, now you're cooking. Just something to think about. Tesla should not have less gross margin than Home Depot. Really doesn't make sense. Just, something to put in the back of your head and think about. And this is like advanced financial thinking. Buffett did this really well. Buffett will look at something like this. The most important line in any of these statements is this: property, plant, and equipment. So this is Tesla. You could replicate all of Tesla for $33 billion. Right or wrong? Right or wrong? In most ways, I would say yes. Right? Every plant, yes, right. The IP and the brand name are critical. But if you think about it, the whole business can be replicated. Every factory, now it would be empty, but imagine in your mind, every Tesla factory, every plant, even every computer is all contained here in 33 billion. But you want to pay 800 billion for it. Why? Because exactly, Cleantrix, Musk is in there too. Musk is not in here. When you put the brand name, when you put the actual business, you get to 800 billion. What is so special about this 33 billion that in the hands of the people that work at Tesla make it worth 788 billion? And does that not make you feel stupid or crazy as an investor? These people put in $33 billion, and now the world is buying it for 800. It's a hell of an investment, isn't it? In fact, you can look at how much they spent on it last year. You can look at how much money the company has ever raised, $36 billion. And what do you know? They've raised $36 billion to buy $33 billion of equipment, to make an $800 billion company, to make a company that makes more cash flow in one quarter. Well, maybe not. But they make their money back very quickly. They've already made their money back. And certainly from investors. Exactly, Yomo. We'll talk about that in a minute. So when Buffett looked at autos, one of the things he saw is GM looks very different from this. And there's an old book that's out of print that if you guys are nice, I'll show you. I have a couple copies of. of an old Buffett interview where he talks about his thoughts on autos. Let's look at Ford because it's so badly managed, just to prove the point. Buffett is the greatest of all time. Nobody's sat and thought about stocks more than him. I mean, truly, like every day for the last 70 years, the guy's thought deeply about stocks. It's all he's cared about, it's all he thinks about. Let's look at Ford. I don't think I even saved a Ford model, but... Oh, yeah, okay. Ford. That's $10 or something. Let's do real quick. This will take 1 second. I'm just going to do 1 quarter for Ford. Q2 24. Revenue, gross margin, operating income, and net income. And then here we're going to do AR, inventories, PP&E. And these are really the only things you need to know. You see me doing all these statements. This is, if you ask Warren Buffett, do you need to do all that? He would say, yes and no. You could do it with just this. Ford inventory, 17 billion. Ford PP&E, 40 billion. So $40 billion of equipment. Ford accounts receivable, 16 billion. So does anybody know what this is called, by the way? These first two? Some people call it. You have a special name for it. Yeah, you almost got it. Working capital. So here's the revenue. We're going to do CapEx too. Oh, I got it. In the wrong column. Ford gross margin 15%. Operating income okay. So every quarter they got to do 2 billion capex to maintain their property, plant, and equipment because it's going to kind of run out. This is capital that they're sort of borrowing, if this makes sense. Why is that? Well, accounts receivable, this is money they're floating to their customers. Their customers owe them this money. They could go down there with Tony from The Sopranos and collect it today, right? But they're being nice. They're saying, we'll let you hold on to $17 billion. Pay us when you can. 90 days, whatever it is. Inventory is the same thing. It's kind of a loan. Inventory is, we've built this product. We spend money making this product and it's sitting on our shelf. Half of it is working in progress. Half of it is raw materials, half of it is finished. Maybe a third. But it's sitting there and we spent money on it and we haven't converted it to cash yet. So we're talking about $34 billion we have lying around. We made $1 billion off that. But did we make $1 billion off that? Because we had to spend $2 billion to maintain this property, plant, and equipment. And oh, by the way, this property, plant, and equipment costs money one day too. So between that, the working capital, and the maintenance, we're making any money at all. How about cash flow? Cash flow from operations for 6 months was $3 billion. So at the end of all this, maybe we scrape by $1 billion. Right? Cash flow 3.4, CapEx 2.0, so it's 1.3, 1.4, oh, 1.3, and we spent this much to make 1.3 billion. So you could look at it as a yield, 3% return on equity. Now that's in 1 quarter, but that's something that is pretty modest. You do that for other companies, it's a little different. Maybe we should do that for Tesla. But the point is that, again, maybe part of this is being miscast by looking at revenue as not really what it seems like. And that happens a lot in businesses. And if you think about it as just a battery factory, or even if they split the, another simple thing is you do a spin out. You spin out the battery company, and maybe the auto company is even worthless. It doesn't matter. But you list both of them, Tesla batteries. Tesla batteries could be worth $1 trillion or $2 trillion. Working capital is a lot of things, but that's a good way to start thinking about what's important for business working capital. And if you read the Buffett interview, you'll see that's the way he thinks about it. He mostly looks at AR and inventories, which one should. Yep, this is all about ROE, ROTA, and other. In fact, I call it, and a handful of people that work for me and know me over the years know that I call it the Buffett return. You actually you can find out, instead of ROA or ROE, we could call it the Buffett return, basically. BROA, Buffett return on assets. But I've never really talked about that before.